interesting rule that at the beginning of their study they want to change words, but at the end they choose rather a safe job, and we have discovered that it's connected with our curriculum, and they prepare analysis of our legal textbook. So my question is about your curriculum in your legal education.
I'm going to shock people by saying that I think the law degree at Oxford is not a very progressive law degree. And I think that law in our more elite institutions is often rather limited in what it's offering to our students. The majority of students who study law at Oxford become commercial lawyers. They're snapped up by the big commercial law firms. They're obviously clever. They've obviously been well inducted into the letter of the law. There are much more interesting things, for example, happening at University College London in terms of law in a wider spectrum, and law in society and law in the economy and all of that kind of thing. And I would like to see more of that happening in Oxford. And you know, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to see an Institute of Human Rights being created here in Oxford, and that there should be other kinds of things like that. But it's hard to do it when you've got a law degree that was created 800 years ago. So you know, there's some slight problems about getting movement on that. But you're right that often law students start off wanting. They all say to me they want to become human rights lawyers. It's very difficult because we now have fees being paid for studying, and like you, I got the £360 grant, and so the people come out with debt, and the big commercial law firms can offer training contracts which actually pay twice as much as you would, I mean, they often pay as much as £40,000. I mean, serious money. And so, people then think, I'll go there and I'll pay off my debts and then I'll become a human rights lawyer. And as we all know, deeply seductive, and so it doesn't usually happen. But it's very interesting, again, that it's women choose more than men to go into those fields that are not highly remunerated, but which are much more about law as an engine for social change. And so that's an interesting phenomenon, that we're seeing many more of the choices, that people making those choices. We've had serious cuts to legal aid in Britain, and it's meaning that there are real problems, and there's contraction of law practitioners, because there isn't public work being supported by public funding, and we're going to suffer the consequences of that. And then there'll be new inventions of how you try and fill the gaps. But all I would say to you is, yes, high utopian ideas about what they're going to do with law, and then it becomes, the practicalities become harder. But I'm optimistic, because I still see many young people who do want to use law to good ends, and who give lots of time and energy to acting for citizens who are in trouble. Yeah.
Can I just echo what both Helene said and what Dan said earlier about access to justice and legal aid cuts? It's a very under-reported phenomenon in the last few years that there has been absolutely draconian cuts to legal aid, specifically in relation to family law, which plainly affects women particularly, but also on the application for judicial review. Recently, the Supreme Court ruled that the £1,000 fee for access to tribunals was unlawful, and that's going to have to be paid back. But it's a drop in the ocean. That is a fundamentally important retrograde step that has taken place, which will have really damaging effects, partly because of the lack of recruitment to the bar and to solicitors in those areas of practice, but more fundamentally to the access to justice, without which the rule of law is just three words and not a reality. More questions?
I wanted to I suddenly remembered that our friend from Bangladesh asked me the question about Sharia law. And I do want to just quickly say to you, I would like there to be no space for religious law in any of our system, in any part of our system. I know that what people say in answer to that is that, if people want to have private adjudications of things, they do it in the commercial world, so why shouldn't they be able to do it in areas like marriage or family problems or whatever, and go to the elders of your religious community to do that. And it happens in the Jewish community, it happens in the Christian community and so on. The problem is that any of those things work badly for women. They work badly for women. And so I'm actually very antagonistic towards that.
We're running shortly out of time. Can I take 3 questions?
Is there a question on gender responsibility?
Diane has not answered.
No, should do it again.
Well, Deanne.
I've got a note of the ones I haven't answered yet.
Okay, answer those questions. Let the
If you
answer the questions we've already had.
people first, and I
Okay.
can mention them all at the end.
No, go ahead. Diane?
I'll do it now. Okay. In response to gender budgets, I mean, there's a whole big review. Sheila Quinn has done a whole IMF review of the kind of development of budgets over time. Being part of the Women's Budget Group, we look at the UK budget every time, and in terms of having any impact, one never knows, but one tries all the time. But I mean, just in terms of trying to get better, to get the government to do it, the Women and Equalities Commission and the House of Lords have commented on the poor quality of what our Treasury do, and they're trying to bring some change. They're saying that people need training, but how effective the Women and Equalities Committee is, I don't know. This is an all-wide parliamentary committee that advises the government. So having people in place in those things matters. Maybe it will bring about more change than we're able to do from the outside, but I don't know. And just coming back to your question about social norms, while I've got the floor, I think I think that's in a sense why quotas matters, because I think seeing people in different positions changes people's perceptions, and hopefully it will roll forward from there. But clearly social norms are difficult to change, but they may help.
Okay, there's such interest that I've been given 5 more minutes, so can we have 3 questions? We'll take them all together. Yes. Can you go ahead?
More of a comment on what you're saying about how students have all this hope, and then they finish a law degree and they have no hope and take corporate jobs. The fees aren't going to change, and legal aid cuts may or may never come back. So I think it's up to law schools and maybe even in practice to tap into that spirit that's still there. They're still to have this goodwill, but they can't afford to take human rights jobs. It's up to either law schools to embed a culture of pro bono work within students, so that when they go into practice in corporate commercial firms, they take that spirit with them. I know corporate social responsibility is probably it's a problematic thing, but these students still have that hope, and I think it's up to us to find structures to channel that hope and that wanting to help in a way that not to give up on them just so they take corporate jobs.
Yeah. Okay, we'll just take 3 questions and then we'll... Yes.
Thank you so much. And I think we all agree that it's fascinating as a workshop, and we learn so much. And listening to you both and before, most country in developing country and underdeveloped country like Burma, I'm originally from Burma, my name is Mer, and particularly women rights activists look up to the developed and enlightened country like UK. Now, so like listening to you all, and really in a way that very depressing. And it's a really interesting thing is that one thing we heard loud and clear is the structural nature of social norms and patriarchy cultures. And I'm so aware that because of Burma just escaped from militarization recently, right? So and also when Diana also talked about quota. Quota doesn't work in Burma because the Burmese women voters agreed that this is not a women's job, so it doesn't work. But when you talk about we need a law, and law can audit and monitor the equalities, but again, yet there's a social structure that underneath. How do we tackle these social norms? And then generally speaking, in our popular notion is that we don't focus on social changes. we do focus on economic transformation, infrastructure, all this stuff. Where do we start to make a social change and cultural change?
Thank you very much. Third question. No, you? Yeah. Oh, you had a question? Oh, you have a question. Sorry, question.
Thanks, mine isn't really a question, it's just a desire to talk a little bit about, we may not have time now, but tomorrow or later, this whole question of social attitudes, of abuses of power, in brackets, Harvey Weinstein and all of that, because it seems to me that that is absolutely fundamental to the discussion of inequality. I mean, what we've heard about jobs and about the economics is also, of course, fundamental, but there is this question of social attitudes. And I suppose my question was, I've been fascinated by the debates between men and amongst men and women about this issue that's been unfolding the past number of weeks, and ways in which men have talked about, the limits of what's acceptable. They've said that the limits of what is acceptable has changed, but actually no, it's just it's a fresh perception of abuse and inequality. So my question is, what will it take for men to give up their power? To actually give up, this sense of entitlement to women's bodies, this sense that, it's okay to touch somebody's knee.